Sarah asked me to speak a little bit about women learning, and all I can do is share some of the things that I've come across over the years. Some of them I teach to the girls in Beis Rivka, some of them share with my family, some of them I pick up along the way, and they're all very, very meaningful. So, being that we're Nasaret Yemei Tshuva and by Chassidim, we're always happy. So I'll start with a vart of the Rebbe Rashab on Simchas Torah. Now, this vart I saw in several places. I saw it repeated in the Sikha. I saw it in the letters of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and there were cross-references, and apparently this vart was repeated different ways in the Igros and in the Sikhas. But the Rebbe Rashab made Kiddush on Simchas Torah, and it happened to be Wednesday. And he said, Heint is Mittwoch, today is Wednesday. Nish jeder Mittwoch kann man also reden. Not every Wednesday can we speak the way we're speaking today. Und nicht jeder Mittwoch kann das also angenommen werden. And not every Wednesday can this be received in the same way. And he said the famous words that just like it's a mitzvah to put on tefillin every day, it's a mitzvah to spend time thinking about the chinuch of one's children. And then the Rebbe Rashab said these words. Bachsidim is nicht kein Unterschied zi a ben, zi a bas. By Chassidim, when it comes to chinuch, there is absolutely no difference between a daughter and a son, or a son and a daughter. And by Chassidim, it is known that the same energy that went into educating the boys in Torah, in mitzvahs, in halacha, in midas tevas, in chassidus, went into the education of the girls. So I thought I would begin with that, and I'd like to share with you a few interesting things. Around, I don't know how many years ago it is, over 20 for sure, the Yiddish Shehem came out. It was, I remember the color, it was a rose pink color on the cover. It was an issue that came out in honor of Matan Torah, and there was a picture of the Luchais on the cover in white, and inside there was an article that fascinated me. I read it. It was written by Rabbi Yoshua Dubrovsky under one of his famous pen names, and I was so fascinated. I had never heard anything of this. Whoever I mentioned it to had not heard anything of it. I called Mar Garwitz and I said, we must teach this to our girls. This is the most incredible thing I've ever read. So she said, design a course. So we spent a few years designing this course where we did not really have the material, but we did a lot of calling and asking and researching. The article spoke about a group of girls from Chabad families who lived in Riga in the 1930s. And this group of most Lubavitch Hasidim lived in Russia in those years for different reasons. There were Chabad families in Riga, which was not at all a Hasidic place. It was a Jewish community along the German style. And these girls got together, it did not explain why or anything like that, to study Hasidus. The previous Rebbe was living in Poland, and he had a correspondence with these girls. He set up 3 Hasidim in Riga to be mashpiyim for these girls, and the article was fascinating. It had a picture of each of the mashpiyim. It had a picture of a cover page that said, Igeres Kiyum Nefesh Min Yisrael, a letter about giving life to a Jewish soul, from the Rebbe of Lubavitch, sent to the girls of Achos HaTmimim to Riga, 1937. And there were all kinds of other details. There's no time to go into all of them, but it was so fascinating. So I went to school. It was part of something else we were doing. We were learning about the previous Rebbe and the history of that period. I shared it with the girls. I told them that I don't know anything about this other than what I'm telling them. This was the background. At the end of the article, there was a word-for-word account of the yechidus that the previous Rebbe had with these girls, anonymously recorded. We studied the yechidus, and there was also a letter to the 3 mashpiyim telling them how to study Hasidus with these young girls. But in the copy of the letter that the article had, the names of the mashpiyim were missing. Harav, blank, blank, blank. So I shared it with them, and whatever material I could add, I had spoken to Rabbi Levin in the library. He was helpful as much as he could have been at the time. I did not know that this article was full of mistakes because the author had only what he had and was only able to speak to the people who he quoted. In the next issue of the Yiddish Shehem, the mistakes were corrected. There was another letter to the Achos Hatmimim, and I still was not able to figure out what this was all about. But shortly after that, the Rebbe had asked earlier to print the series of letters of the Rabbeim. So we have Igros Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe and of all the Rabbeim, and volume 4 of the letters of the previous Rebbe was, I guess the letters there are from the years 1937, 1938, loaded with correspondence to these girls. So now it became easier to teach it. And I wanted to share with you a few interesting things. I wondered, what is this letter that was sent to the girls of Riga? It said it was a cover page. I'm just sharing things with you to show you how when we learn so many things from each other. I had a student in that class. It happened to be Rivki Slonim. She went home. In those years, the girls would go home and they would repeat what they learned because we didn't have everything we have printed now. We did not have so much of it. We had very little of it in English. And she came back and she said, I showed this to my grandfather, Rabbi Zalman Garani, and he said he knows what it is. Not only does he know what it is, he has a copy of it. And he said it's in a book and I could bring the book to school. Now, I was afraid to take a book that I didn't think anyone had to school and copy it from Rabbi Zalman Garani because things do get lost. And I said, please don't bring it. But she brought it, and I stood near the copy machine. I did not take my eyes off that book. Rabbi Garani did what many Jews in Russia had done. They did not really have Sfarim, but they would collect letters, Maimarim, Sichas, and they would bind them together in books. So he had the cover page of this letter, and he had the actual letter. I did not know that this letter is really in Likutei Devarim. Now it's also in Igros Kodesh. But then someone kindly showed it to me. And it was a letter written to a Jew in America who, under the guidance of Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson, the grandfather of Rabbi Oldtime, got a Jew who he was acquainted with to study Hasidus. And he wrote to the Rebbe in Poland that this Jew, whose name was Mr. Cohn, has begun to study Hasidus. And this letter was a response to this Jew about how great it is to inspire another Jew to Yiddishkeit. I could not understand what does this have to do with the girls of Achos Hatmimim. But then in the Igros Kodesh, Rabbi Levin has all kinds of interesting footnotes. These girls studied Hasidus. Apparently they asked the previous Rebbe if they could call themselves Achos Hatmimim. It was very unusual for girls to study Hasidus in a group in those years. They went to a Jewish school. Rabbi Chadakov happened to be the principal. He was living in Riga of that school. But somehow, something inspired them, and one of the letters is printed where the Frierdiker Rebbe says to the Mashpiyim, I got the request of the girls to be called Achos HaTmimim, perhaps sisters to the Tmimim of Tomchei Tmimim, and I agree that they could use this name. The Rebbe gave these girls projects in addition to the learning. One of the projects was to translate writings of Hasidus into their language. And that's why this letter was sent to them. What I want to share with you is how chashuv, how important, how special these girls were to the Rebbe. The Rebbe would tell them how to make farbrengens. The Rebbe would tell them what to do with the farbrengens. The Rebbe asked the Mashpiyim that everything that went on at a farbrengen should be recorded by an individual girl who would serve as a recording secretary. The Rebbe writes to the girls, I have all the reports that your Mashpiyim have sent me. And in addition to that, the Rebbe asked that the girls should continue to study Hasidus and they should get others interested. In this article, there is an account of an anonymous report, as I mentioned before, of a Yechidus with the previous Rebbe, but there is no date. But from the context, we figure out the date. And this is one of the most fascinating things I ever learned in my life. And now it's actually printed in the back of Sefer HaSichos of the years of the 1930s. Unfortunately, the war broke out. But in Riga, the Jews were not affected directly by the war in the early years. And they heard that the previous Rebbe is traveling to America through Riga. The previous Rebbe was escaping from the Nazis, and he was able to escape by way of Riga. And they said to their mashpi, and these girls hadn't necessarily seen the Rebbe, could it be arranged that when the Rebbe goes through Riga, he could meet with them? And it was arranged. And it seems that one of the Rebbe's secretaries wrote down, word for word, what went on at this Yechidus. And because we know that the Yechidus took place on a certain day of the week, and we know that it took place on Purim Katan, when there were 2 Adars, and we know the Rebbe was traveling to America, we figure out that that's the first Adar of 1940. The Rebbe came here, of course, in the second Adar. And I'd like to repeat some of this Yechidus to you. The first thing the Rebbe said to the girls is that he has the reports of what they're doing, and that he sees that they're making great progress thus far. He hopes that it will continue, and before he tells the girls anything else, he asks for 2 volunteers to repeat in his presence the last 2 Maimorim the girls studied. And in the account we read that one student, her name was Skatlov, these are all families we know in our neighborhood, their relatives. She repeated one Maimer. One Maimer was So Hartasa Lateva and Parshas Noach. And the other girl, whose name was Bliner, she had relatives living on my corner in 706 Eastern Parkway, Mr. and Mrs. Bliner. And she repeated the Maimer Lech Lecha. When that was completed, the Rebbe said to the girls, what is the purpose of learning Hasidus? The purpose of learning Hasidus is not to replace the learning of Shulchan Aruch and the observance of Halacha, which every Jewish child must know. The purpose of learning Hasidus is to improve one's midos, is to have a refined character, and to do practical mitzvos with a greater feeling, as Hasidim have always done. Then the Rebbe said, I'm making it a little shorter, but I just want to give you some of the interesting points. That Hasidim have always studied Musar, because Musar teaches one how to have a good character. But they always studied Musar with a Hasidic gefil, with a Hasidic sensibility and a Hasidic feeling. And the Rebbe explains to them the difference between Hasidus and Musar, that Musar achieves its end through Shvira, through breaking the negative, and through creating a distance between yourself and what it is that you're breaking away from, whereas Hasidus accomplishes the same thing in a way of kiruv and hamshach, by drawing the thing near. Afterwards, the Rebbe said to the girls that and I'm thinking, reading this now, and we've been doing this in Bishrovka different ways, in one form or another, for over 25 years, and how much more true this is now than it ever was. The Rebbe says that the time we are in is a very difficult one for Jewish men, especially for Jewish women and girls. The epidemic winds are blowing all kinds of foreign things that Jewish children could really do without, and it's having not such a good effect. And we hope that the study of Hasidus will be able to hold the equilibrium in the Jewish society. Afterwards, the Rebbe says to the girls, I want to repeat to you a word that a Rebbe once said to a group of parents when he made a farbrengen with them about the chinuch of their children. Does not identify where the word comes from. And these are more or less the Rebbe's words. That Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, in the book of Mishlei, calls the great Jewish woman Eshes Chayil. What is Eshes Chayil? We call it the woman of valor. And the Rebbe says, Afrui was hat Kraft, a woman who is brave, who is courageous. Why does Shlomo HaMelech use this title to describe the ultimately great Jewish woman? The word Chayil is not usually associated in Torah with the woman. And this is the reason why. Because if you go through the Eshes Chayil, you come to the last line, and there it says, Sheker hachein vehevel hayofi, Isha yiras Hashem hitis halo. And we all know the meaning of that. And the Rebbe said, there's another way to look at this. There will come a time in history when Sheker hachein, what will find favor in the eyes of people? Sheker, falseness. Vehevel hayofi, what will people consider beautiful? Things of hevel, things of folly, nonsense, silly stuff, worthless stuff. At that time, the Jewish society will be very much affected. But don't give up, because how do we know how negatively it will be affected? Sheker hachein vehevel hayofi, Isha yiras Hashem hitis halo. A God-fearing woman, if there will be such a thing at such a time in history, will be tis halal. In Hebrew, lehalel means to praise, but leholel means to mock. If there will be such a thing as a God-fearing woman, she will be mocked. But don't underestimate the greatness of the Jewish woman. Shlomo HaMelech tells us in the next line, the final line of Eshes Chayil, Tenula mi pri yadeha, v'halaluha b'sha'arim ma'aseha. Give to the woman from the fruit of her hand, and let her deeds laud her at the gate. Ladies, the Rebbe says, take the first letter of each of these four words, Tnu, tough, give, La, to her, Mipri, mem, Yadeha, her hands. These four letters, if you change around their order, they spell the word Tilin. Don't underestimate, these are the Rebbe's words exactly in Yiddish, the need to educate a Jewish daughter. Because the only one in the world, in such a society, who could raise what we call a Tilimid. You know what a Tilimid is? A Tilimid are the Yidden that we read about in the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, the Yidden who had such profound emunah and such tmimus, such wholesomeness, such integrity and such sincerity that nothing in the world could shake them. Who could raise such a child in a time like ours? This is in the hand of the Jewish woman. So this is what the Rebbe told the girls. But we always know that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe, these are very practical people. The Rebbe says to the girls, every branch of knowledge gives you a certain. I remember once Dr. Rosen was telling me, he's talking about something, and he says, you have to know certain things because knowledge is power. Every branch of knowledge gives you a certain power. The kayach that comes from studying Hasidus, that's true good. But you know what? Since the Chet Eitz Hadas, Ein Tov V'lo Ra. There's no such thing in our world as good that doesn't have mixed into it a little bit of not good. What not good can come from studying Hasidus? Here are the Rebbe's words. Amol is da a heder hamishmas zu the letterus Sometimes it causes such confidence when we study Hasidus that it can cause young people to lack proper respect for teachers and for parents because it makes us so strong. So the Rebbe addresses the girls and says, if this happens to any of you members of Achos Hatmimim, tut das mir sehr weh. It hurts me very, very much. Die was willen stehen in a guten Matzav, if you want me to think well of you, you have to strengthen your derech eretz for your parents and for your teachers. When the Rebbe concluded his words, a girl got up. It mentions her name. I don't remember it, even though I read it a few times today. And she thanked the Rebbe for making Achos Hatmimim, which has brought good fruits up until now, and which will, Emirtza Hashem, bring more good fruits. She blesses the Rebbe that he should have Frierdiker Rebbe was very not well at this point, physically, that the Rebbe should have a refuah shlema in the schus of establishing Achos Hatmimim, and she wishes the Rebbe a good journey. And the Rebbe responds by giving a bracha to all the girls that they should be well. And then he says these unbelievable words. I want that your relationship with me should be like children towards their very own parents, because I consider anyone who is connected to me like my very own child. So this is just a little bit of the insight into this group of girls who were supposed to study Hasidus. Tragically, this group perished when the Nazis came into Riga. But we do find letters where the Rebbe, I guess it was a little bit earlier, or maybe in places where there were survivors in Riga, nobody survived, only those who have escaped, where the Rebbe writes to different individuals, I have not heard anything about you from the Mashpiyim in the last period of time. Is it because you have gotten married? And if the girls have gotten married, whom did they marry? Where do they live? The interest in every Farbrengen is unbelievable. Many, many years ago, I didn't even know what it was until much later. In the Yiddish Shehein, there was an article in the English section where the girls of Achos no, it wasn't the Yiddish, I'm sorry, where the girls of Achos Hatmimim made a Farbrengen Yotes Kislev. And they wrote to the previous Rebbe, to Poland, what they did, in whose house it was, how they celebrated, what nigunim they sang, what time they danced, until what time they danced, how they read the story of Yotes Kislev chapter by chapter, and they signed their names. Now, it's getting late. I just want to share with you a few more thoughts. Some of them I'll leave out. But when you think about this, where did all this start? So, how many of you have read the previous Rebbe's memoirs, Sefer HaZichronos? The Sefer HaZichronos, the memoirs, is an incredible book. The English version is amazing, but I have to look something up in the Yiddish version today because the English one I couldn't find. And I never knew that there was a supplement in the back of Sefer HaZichronos. And I only found out because I want to share with you a thought from the Sikha of the Rebbe, where in one of the footnotes the Rebbe refers us to the story that I was looking for in Sefer HaZichronos, and it took me a long time to find the page. I only reviewed the Sikha later. And there, after the Rebbe tells us where the story is, he says to look in the Haisafis in the back. Mm-hmm. So it's in volume 2. There are several chapters that trace the ancestry of Rabbi Baruch, the Alter Rebbe's father. And in that ancestry, we discover a grandmother of the Alter Rebbe whose name was Rachel, and you have to read it. I can't give it over in 2 minutes. I'm never as well as it's written, that's for sure. But this Rachel was a very highly educated woman in a time when women were not educated in this manner for whatever reason. When she got married, her husband did not know about her background. Now, in the Haisafis, in the supplement at the back, it's in Hebrew, even though the memoirs are in Yiddish. And it's written over there by the previous Rebbe that traditionally there had always been 2 schools of thought regarding the formal book education of Jewish girls. going all the way back to the time of the Gemara. There were those who felt that it should not be done for whatever reason. There were those who felt that it must be done. They were not the majority. But even those who felt it should not be done, it was not because it's not a good thing to do, but rather because it would not work out well due to the circumstances if you can't immerse yourself and if you can't study. And you read over there how this woman, Rachel, was explaining to her daughter, how come men and women are different? And how come Hashem created different things in the world? It's a fascinating thing to read. I don't think it exists in English yet. Or maybe I just don't know. Maybe we can learn it another time. In the memoirs itself, but the supplement I never saw. Anyhow, it goes into a whole discussion of creation and all the levels. It's very, very interesting. But the point was that this Rachel had to hide her scholarship from her husband because he came from a different school. She came from followers of the earlier Balei Shem and the Baal Shem Tov, people who had one view, and he came from another view. And because of an incident that happened, she was so well versed in halacha, and they were wearing their gloves, and because there was an Eruv, there are different customs regarding that. And somebody came to tell them on the way home from Shul on Shabbos that the Eruv had broken, and they were in a dilemma. What do they do with the gloves? One of the members of the family had taken Sfarim, and all of a sudden, she was turned to by her, I think it was her father, who said to her, "What's the din?" And you can imagine that her husband thought that his shver was making a very sad joke. And she was very, very embarrassed. You read all about her character. But he said that the men, they know Gemara, but Rachel knows halacha, Shulchan Aruch. She quoted Shulchan Aruch, the book, the part, the line, and she said the din of the gloves, and she said what to do with the books. And she was very embarrassed. Her husband did not know her secret. And she wondered what this would do to their marriage. And she had good reason to wonder. He was very, very upset. Ultimately, of course, it all worked out, and he went along with her. But there's a sikha that the Rebbe spoke, Tafshin Nun. It's one of the last sikhas we have from Parshas Emor. It was a week before the Neshei Chabad convention. It was a sikha about women learning. And the Rebbe explains there that women always learn. Maybe not everybody. There were always individuals who learned. And he says, like the story my shver tells in the memoirs, and as it's known, my shver, the way he educated his own daughters. So our Rebbetzins were all very highly educated people. In terms of knowing everything a Jewish woman has to know, and way beyond. And in this sikha, the Rebbe explains that women today must study Torah. And he brings all kinds of interesting sources. There's no time now, from the Shalah and from Shulchan Aruch and from Gemara. And he answers those questions of those people who say that the Gemara says that women can't handle it and all kinds of things like that. That has to be seen in that proper context. But one of the things that's so fascinating is the Rebbe explains over there that when the Gemara says that it will make them sly and shrewd, not the Jewish view of being a feminine person, the Rebbe says, in our world, when the armunius, the slyness and the smartness and whatever word you, sophistication, whatever you want to call it, has penetrated into every single corner, and every girl, every Jewish girl gets this anyhow, shouldn't it be that she should get it from our Torah? And even though it's become standard for Jewish girls to go study in schools, the Sarashtir and Beis Yaakov, and it's become in even the communities who did not study from books, some Hasidic communities, today they've also changed. The world is different. And the Rebbe says, even though the reason that we had to start formal education for girls is because the generations have become less, on the other hand, look how much more Torah. The Rebbe explains that when you understand what you do it with so much more passion. How knowing something in Torah increases one's yiras shamayim. It's just fascinating. Everybody has to study it. Mr. Makovsky, I'm sure, maybe already brought it in. I don't know. just want to share two more interesting details. In the Rebbe's Rishimas, there is a Rishima from 1941 or 1942 that the Rebbe wrote when Beis Rivka was being established. It was, I guess, notes of a speech. I don't know if it was ever said or not, but it was printed. Rabbi Kalmanson used to teach it in Beis Rivka. And over there, our Rebbe, before he's Rebbe, writes these words, that people will come and say, we don't need a Beis Rivka, we don't need schools like this, because we don't need our daughters to be Rebbitzins. This is America in early 1940. They have to understand that the purpose of a school for girls is not to create Rebbitzins. There's one purpose only, that the girls should remain Jewish daughters, who in turn will be able to impart it to the next generation. In many letters, the Rebbe writes that the purpose of learning used to be to acquire knowledge. Today, the purpose of studying Torah is to ensure that one will remain a Jew. I think I'm going to stop. There are a few more things, but it's getting late. In that Sikha, the Rebbe says, very, very interesting, in Chumash we are taught, when it says, the Sikha was at Parshas Emor, where Hashem tells Moshe to tell Aaron to teach the Kohanim. And it says, say it to them and say it to them twice. This is a very famous explanation, that the older ones or those in authority should teach the younger ones. You have to teach it to them, and they have to teach it to others. The words that are quoted from the Gemara is lahazhir gedolim al haktanim, to make sure that those in authority, the parents, the teachers, the kohanim, should forewarn those who are less in terms of learning. Here again, you see the beauty of the light. Lahazhir is from the same word as the word Zohar, light. The purpose of teaching Torah to another is to bring out the light in them. And then it turns it around and says, why don't we read it like we have in the pasuk that heralds the coming of Mashiach, that Eliyahu will come, veheshiv leiv avos al banim, that he will reconcile the hearts of the parents and the children. He will fix over this gap that exists between the generations. The Rebbe indicates, in our time, like you said, lahazir gdolim al yedei haktanim, that the younger ones, the smaller ones in our world will bring out the light of the neshama of their elders. The younger people will teach and inspire their parents and their grandparents. And I'll conclude with the vart I found in a letter of the previous Rebbe about Hasidic education. The Rebbe says it's all about light. The world says that when it's very light, you can see all the flaws. You walk into a room and it's brightly lit, you see the mess, you can see the dirt. It's a problem. Chassidim say that when it's very light, you can see the beauty of another person. And that's what chinuch is all about, being that it's now Aseret Yemei Tshuva. I'll conclude, and whatever I left out, maybe we'll do another time. It's endless. Chazal say, Pischu li Pesach kechudo shel machat. Open for me a door like the sharp point of a needle. Vani eftach lachem kepischo shel ulam. And I will open for you like the grand doors of the ulam, of the grand chambers in the Beis HaMikdash. So we have a question. Our Rebbe teaches us. Why does it, when it wants to say make a small opening, why does it say kechudo shel machat, like the sharp point of a needle? There's so many tiny things. A point? Because what's the purpose of the point of the needle? The purpose of the point of the needle is to penetrate the cloth and to combine two things that are disconnected. And this is what Hashem wants from every single one of us. This is what our learning is supposed to accomplish for us and for all those who learn with us and all those we learn with, because it's not a matter of a teacher and a student. We're all the children of Hashem. We're all Chassidim of the Rebbe. We're all dedicated and indebted to Reb Snechana and to Reb Leivik and to all the Rabbeim and to the Eibishter. And the point is, we just have to put that point through the Gashmias, and we have to connect it to the Ruchnias. And then we have the doors of the Beis HaMikdash opening before all of us, where we will see Reb Shulchana, all the people who went to Machal Chana, and the people who had the schus to help Mrs. Lapkowski to teach there, and the people who had the schus to know all the people, and we all learn from each other. And it should be before the sun rises on Zion Tishrei. A Gmar Teva to everybody.
Thank you. That was beyond magnificent. Thank you.
Please don't leave. There's a slideshow now of new and exciting things that we're planning.